Welcome to episode 2 of The Rings of Power is Good, actually. I'm Quincy.
I'm Nadia.
We're brother and sister who are lovers of the Lord of the Rings and literature in general, and we want to give you some insights into why The Rings of Power is actually a great TV show that you should be watching. Today, we're going to try to respond to some of the common things that you might hear on the internet about why The Rings of Power is bad, why you shouldn't bother watching it, and we're not going to do so in a way that slams the online haters. There are some people out there who are just internet trolls and are just trying to get clicks and stuff for being internet trolls. And hopefully everybody recognizes those as people who are, you know, not people that you should pay attention to. But leaving those kind of folks aside, I think there is some general confusion about the show. I think the first thing to start off with is this idea that the Rings of Power is woke. Um, and a first thing I would say, if you're saying that, you need to try to define what you mean by woke because nobody ever really does define what they mean by woke. But I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt in that the idea of a show being woke is that it tries to change the source material, adapt the script, direct its decisions to push a political point of view. And in this case, it would be a progressive liberal point of view. And I would say that one thing, maybe take a look into the background of the show writers who are from a pretty conservative religion. So I kind of doubt, to be honest, that they are super, super woke, so to speak. And I'm not saying maybe some people enjoy that. Maybe you want that in your show writings. But I kind of think, number one, that there's some reasons to belie that kind of thinking. But the thing that I would say is that most of the time, I think these concerns come back to the fact that the Rings of Power has chosen to do colorblind, so to speak, or color conscious casting, where they cast people for roles without real regard to their skin color. I don't even think that Rings of Power has done that. I think they've actually, in a lot of cases, decided to lean towards, hey, Tolkien had different um, figures in these stories that he described a certain way. We're going to try to cast someone in that way, whether that's right or wrong. But they've decided in a lot of cases that characters that they're introducing are going to be anybody who's capable of filling the role, whether they're white or black or whatever race or skin color they are, that they can be in those roles. I think that's great. I mean, I love that in all my shows. I would love it if the Rings of Power and Lord of the Rings movies did it for any role. Just cast somebody in the role regardless of their skin color. It doesn't bother me. And I'm going to be real honest and say that if Tolkien, I'm not sure how much time we should spend saying what Tolkien would think about an adaptation because I think he'd be pretty critical of all adaptations of his stuff. But
Yeah.
I think on Tolkien's list of complaints about the Rings of Power or any Lord of the Rings adaptation, the idea of an actor's skin color would be not even probably part of his main complaints. When you look at what he says in his letters, I don't think he'd particularly care if a show was like, we're just going to cast people regardless of skin color. He would say, okay, and let's talk about this idea of Sauron and Galadriel having a little flirtation. Which to be clear, I'm not like, I understand what the show's doing there, but I'm just
Shout
saying
out to the Haladriels. Okay, we love you.
when when people say that Tolkien would be turning over his grave because they have Durin's wife is a black dwarf, they're insane. Tolkien would just simply not care about that at all. And so the thing that I would say is that don't think the show is woke because it's color conscious or colorblind in its casting. They're just casting actors and actresses who are qualified for the role, and they're all really, really great actresses and actors who are doing a great job. So put that aside. That's what I would
I
say.
would say, yeah, no. I've heard like fans say, oh, they're filling a quota or whatever else. And I'm like, I think you want to seriously examine if that is what you think is happening. I think that like no corporation is going to be something that we love, I think, but I think we can give some of the benefit of the doubt to creators or casting or actors. I'm like, are you saying that the actors that they've chosen are bad? Are you saying that they're not as good as like the white actors? I think that one is a point of view that is something that you want to probably examine if that's something that you've been thinking. I'm like, and I can understand like saying, oh, this probably wouldn't happen, you know, in this particular area. The other thing I would say about some of that is that, it is fantasy. If it's something that you think is maybe unlikely in the real world, it's probably not all that unlikely in Middle Earth. Somebody was saying, why are the Harfoots like of mixed race? Why do they have? Because they're kind of nomadic, and I'm like, it does happen sometimes in real life. So I think if it's something that could happen,
And
I
and
don't
out
know
of
that it has
all
to take you out of the show.
and out of all things, don't complain about the hobbits because Sam's skin is repeatedly described as brown, as very brown. So
Yeah, so I think also, yeah, it's fun. I think it's opened it up to a lot of really great actors. I think as far as things that Tolkien probably would like, I really have to give some shout outs to Rondir as one of the best portrayals of elves, and like people talk a lot about like him, you know, uh tra talking to the tree before he cuts it down. I think that is very
crying over the
yeah.
tree. There's never been a more elf moment than Rondir crying tears over the tree.
That was created by the actor, so I'm just gonna say that was not something that was written in. It was something that he kind of improv. So if you're gonna improv that, I definitely give you a lot of shout outs for really digging into what it means to be an elf. The actor is also very cute on Instagram, so you should follow him. Uh, he's very excited about it, and he always posts fun things about Rings of Power. So
The
yeah.
show, there's one line in the two seasons that I think people could point to and say a woke agenda, and that's when the kind of nationalist dock worker in Numenor says the elves will take our jobs. And I think that's a little bit of a clunky screenwriting moment, but he very
Yeah.
clearly is emphasizing that if elves are getting influence in Numenor, they don't get tired, they don't die. So what's going to happen if we have elves in Numenor? They're going to be able to do the jobs that we want to do better than we do. And I do think the way that they wrote it, it kind of sounds like it's lifted from the pages of our world, and they should have adjusted how they said that. But I think his concerns are clearly by the show as much as you can explain as you're trying to create a show and move the plot forward makes sense. I mean, if you told me that there was somebody who was going to come and do my job who had the ability to live forever and not get tired and like mentally their faculties are probably stronger than mine, that would be threatening to me. And
This
that's
kind
what
of sounds like what people think AI is going to be like, but I don't think
yeah, true, true. Yeah, now, but of course, AI, the fact that I can ask Alexa a question that is just about as obvious as anything can, and she cannot come up with the answer, leaves me a little skeptical about it. But
one time I may have been driving. I may have been driving, and I couldn't remember Galadriel's dad's name. Trying to ask him about the Sons of Fenway was so funny because it kept trying to answer, and AI was so confused. It could not tell me
AI,
anything.
AI was confused by the Silmarillion. Good thing we
Just
humans
a little
never are. Um,
bit. I
so
was hands-free, by the way. I was not touching my phone.
yeah, so that's one response. Just when people say that, just please know that they're probably thinking that the show put actors of color in roles where Tolkien didn't describe those particular people as having dark skin or whatever. And those things are just things that Tolkien literally says in a letter, I don't care. I don't care about that. Stop thinking I care about that. And describes Numenor several times as he was thinking about Egyptian culture when he wrote that the Numenor stuff. So just don't get wrapped up in that stuff. It's just something that online bad actors want you to. I mean, like people that are trying to whip up outrage about nothing, try to get you into. Don't be concerned with that. They're great actors. The show is not written to promote a certain agenda. There's that one line that again I think makes sense in the context of the show. And maybe it's a little clunkily written, but other than that, you're not going to see those kind of agendas from one side or the other pushed out by the writers who are trying to, as best they can, give across the story of the Second Age as put out in the appendix and where they can draw from the Silmarillion legally, as
No,
best as
no,
they
I
can.
think yeah, no, and I think that they do a good job like trying to stick to a lot of like the ideas and morals of Tolkien's world. I think that's the other thing too. I think that that's if if you do consider those woke, then probably stuff in the original trilogy is going to bug you as well. Because it seems like a lot of the, morals that they're going after and things that are important, like hope, are things that you definitely see in Lord of the Rings. So I think that it's pretty consistent across the way. Yeah, I think there is some clunky right, but I would say, don't I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't give the whole let's get mad because they have a different skin color a lot of air. You can watch and evaluate actors' performances on your own, and I don't think that you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, that's great. What's another common thing that you hear on the internet about Rings of Power?
Oh boy. Well, okay, I don't this is one of those that I think if you can't do this, then I guess maybe you can't do the show. People don't like that the timeline is squished. Squish maybe isn't the word, but they have truncated the timeline because if you follow exactly how it is, we wouldn't be able to have any mortal characters for more than maybe like a season. Um, so I think people don't really enjoy the truncated timeline, but it is one of those things where I'm like, I guess that kind of is a premise that you have to accept going into the show. I don't think it's something different than a lot of things you might have to accept from the movies that aren't entirely accurate. Because it is an adaptation. And like I was just reading a letter where Tolkien's like, hey, I want to sketch out like a history of mythology so people can create different things based on it. And I think um this is one of those where I'm like, it might not be exactly like it is if you sat down and like read the appendices aloud, but I'm like, that's kind of the point. It's an adaptation, and I think they're trying to do it in a way so we can get to know these characters. And I think the choices that they made have made sense to me. Um, and I don't know. I don't think that that's something that you necessarily have to get upset about because they're generally following like plot points that are happening. I think that most of the difference is you actually get to know the characters more, which I don't think is a bad thing. Um, I think the thing that was confusing me was we talked about this too when it started. I think you got to realize like Numenor is farther down the road to its destruction than you might think at the beginning of the show. And so I think if you watch that, man, like man, Numenor kind of sucks. Like it kind of does, um, because they're already kind of down the road to, well, why can't we be immortal and all these other things. Um, so I think that as far as that being an objection, I mean, I guess if you can't do the timeline, you can't do the timeline, but also I'm like, you can just sit and read the appendices aloud if that's what you want. I don't know, sorry, that may be kind of mean.
I
I think
think
all adaptations are going to be different, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that you've hit on the main. I think this is the main criticism outside of accusing the show of having a woke agenda is that it changes Tolkien's writings, it trashes Tolkien's writings, it does its own thing. And the first thing that we have to recognize is probably that the timeline has been compressed to try to make sure that we can have mortal characters for the run of the show. That's the reason. If otherwise, each season, if you were trying to go through the second age, you would have all your mortal characters die off and then new mortal characters to get used to. So that would be very hard for a show to do, and I don't think realistic. So if you accept the compressed timeline, you can accept a lot. The other thing is to understand that the show only has rights to what is in the appendices of The Lord of the Rings and not to
Oh
the
my
full
God.
Silmarillion. That's
Yes,
just so important. And that if they tried to do the exact Silmarillion, they would get shut down by the Tolkien estate, who has not sold the rights to the Silmarillion. They don't have the rights. They have the rights to make the occasional request to have something from the Silmarillion, and then maybe they can use a name, they can use an event that they need, but they're not going to get the rights to all the plot points, to the dialogue, to every name that they want. So they have to make things work. And so that
no, it's
explains
funny
a
because
lot of
like
things.
yeah, no, somebody that I know that had watched the show was still absolutely convinced they had the rights to the Silmarillion and didn't know why they weren't doing it. And I'm like, you need to research a little bit into that and realize that they don't. I think that that is still a big objection that people just don't understand. And I admit it's confusing.
Yeah.
Like when I first was reading about what they had adapted, I'm like, what do they have rights to? And I think the rights are deliberately confusing, though. I think it's kind of like with The Hobbit too. Those rights were confusing as heck. People didn't understand why they were making the movies, I think, because the rights were all tied up very strangely. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And that plays into a lot of it. So, and not every choice that they make am I going to agree with, and that's okay.
Yeah, no.
To be honest, I think the thing that probably bothers me the most is how they portrayed Tom Bombadil, because I don't really think that it matches that well with what's in the books. There are spots where it does, and there's other spots where it totally doesn't. But at the same time, I give them huge credit for trying to bring Tom Bombadil to the screen, which is something that everybody's been terrified to do. So I'm willing to forgive some of the things that I think depart from his character in that sense. Of course, the thing that I think most people online probably get upset about is the first season's idea of Galadriel somewhat falling under Sauron's sway. I think in my opinion, that's something that the show probably should have found another way to do just because of how big of a thing it became for Lord of the Rings fans online. But otherwise, to be honest, as somebody who's willing to watch an adaptation with the idea of are the main plot points getting out there, are the characters faithfully presented, and most importantly, are the themes of this work of literature being brought out? I see all those things happening, and so I'm willing to say, okay, what are they trying to do here with Galadriel falling under Sauron's influence as Sauron uses his shape-shifting ability and his deceptiveness to be able to get into her mind. And it's very clear that what they're doing is bringing out the undertones of a scene where Galadriel describes her relationship with Sauron to Frodo, and they bring out some stuff there that I'd never really thought about of this very personal, antagonistic, intimate um uh enemy thing that Galadriel has going on with Sauron that is throughout the Lord of the Rings and the appendices. They bring that out. And then also they bring out the incredible deceptiveness of Sauron, who is able to deceive just about anybody. And like you're like Galadriel wasn't deceived by Anatar, and in the show, she isn't. She knows by that point when he's trying to make rings, she knows who he is, and she's figured it out before a lot of other people. But at first, she is deceived by him, which I think helps us see how deceptive Sauron is. And the other thing they were able to do in the first season is give us a little glimpse into a scene in the Silmarillion where Tolkien says that people think that Sauron, after the defeat of Morgoth, may have genuinely repented for a minute. And it isn't
Mhm.
quite clear in season one whether Halbrand Sauron is genuinely repenting. But if he is, and where those moments are that you're like, yeah, it seems like maybe he's kind of doubting and can go a different way, especially in, at the beginning of the second season, you see that as well when he runs into a little old man who kind of calls him to embrace his better angels, as Abraham Lincoln said, that you see that little doubt in him, and it brings out that scene in a really powerful way. So it makes sense to
Yeah.
me that they're trying to bring those things out.
No, I mean they talk about like Sauron talks to Yanwei, which is Manwë's messenger who comes and he's like, "Okay, well, you want to repent, let's go back to the Valar and you can confess." And Sauron's like, never mind." Because he's just too proud. He doesn't want to like face consequences. He doesn't want to admit that he was messed up. And that's pretty much how it comes across in Rings of Power as well. And hey, I think I don't think the Galadriel Sauron thing bugs me as much as it does you, but I can understand too. I remember like when you first described the Anatar thing to me that it is cool that Galadriel's not fooled by him. But if you read that too, it's not completely, spelled out what exactly happens. Some of that is a little bit confusing as far as like what Tolkien wrote in different drafts of it
Right.
and
Hmm.
when it was happening. So I think that it's not as set in stone as people think it is, that this is what happened, this is when it happened, like
Right. And Galadriel doesn't know that he's
yeah.
Sauron. She just doesn't trust that he is who he says he is. So, like, she doesn't
So
trust that he can be trusted.
yeah, no, I think that a lot of the objections people do have is that Galadriel's portrayal is not true to who she is. That's another objection. You kind of hit on that too. But oh my gosh, if you read Silmarillion and you read First Age stuff from the elves, they're all crazy, man. I did not realize if you watch movies, even if you read Lord of the Rings, like some of the elves are fairly sedate. Like Elrond is just like this nice he seems very nice, and he is. He's a very kind person. And Galadriel is very wise. but they're losing their freaking minds in the first age. They're all killing each other for shinies all the time. Also, if we talk about Galadriel being a little taken in by people. I'm not gonna say she was totally taken in by like Feanor telling all the elves to go leave where they were supposed to be and go to Middle Earth. She's like, well, I want to have my own kingdom. I want to rule. Like she may not buy into everything that the crazy elf was saying, but she's also not like not listening. I think that that's true to some of what people have objected to in Rings of Power. She's not infallible. She's not above acting in a way that's not great. And like some of the reasons she doesn't leave Middle Earth is because she's not exactly in like the Valar's good books until she rejects the ring, and she rejects that idea that she has to be so powerful and in charge of everything. I think that Galadriel does have problems with pride, and I think that that's integral to her character. That's another thing I didn't get till I watched Rings of Power, and then I read Silmarillion, and I'm like, in ancillary material, and I'm like, it's so true, and it makes her a lot more interesting.
And it makes that moment where she passes on the opportunity to have the ring all that more powerful because you know in
Yep.
that moment that's when that's when essentially the Valar's exile of Galadriel is lifted. When she's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, I can go to the West because I have repented. I have made right what I did wrong in this one moment." And I think the show's going to be able to really make that moment powerful when it's all done. I would
Yeah.
say the other thing that people have a lot of objection to is, of course, Gandalf showing up on a meteor instead of on a ship. And that bothered me for a little while until I guess I was just like, you know what? It's cooler for him to come in on a meteor. And I'm not really sure it changes that much about what the story is trying to say about who Gandalf is. The
You
thing,
know,
the thing
weird
that,
things can happen in Middle Earth. They have like spaceships and stuff.
right,
You know,
right.
space.
Yeah, and right, we just talked about last episode about Tolkas the angel coming from a different world to come and fight Morgoth. Anyway, yeah, that kind of thing. Who knows if he showed up on a meteor? Who knows? Um,
I don't know. Dad
so
is out flying in space fighting dragons. It's fun.
exactly, exactly. So yeah, it doesn't really bother me that much, and I know that we're gonna get the scene with Círdan handing Gandalf the ring to kind of
Also,
end.
also, I'm just
I'm
gonna
sure
say,
that'll be one of the final things we see in season 5. So
everyone who hates the show likes Círdan because he's amazing and he's our baby boy. No one can touch him.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. But so yeah, I just think one of those things to accept. And then, you find out that Tolkien in some of his extended writings had some of the Istari showing up in the Second Age. And so to me
Yeah.
it's all part of the show that you see his character saying, "Oh, you've been told this legend, but this is what actually happened." And I think that is important to realize that Tolkien does some of that himself, like in The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion and in all of his drafts of things. He's working through legends. There's a variety of different accounts. So you can't get too caught up in what's canon. And of course, it also
Yeah.
reminds me of being a fan of The Chosen, like a series. Audie and I, of course, both Christians, followers of Jesus. And you see Christians getting so upset about The Chosen and some creative liberties that they take with trying to bring the story of Jesus to life. But everything they do, they base on their understandings of the scripture and trying to flesh out things that scripture doesn't necessarily flesh out, which you have to do if you want people to understand the themes of what you're trying to bring to life. And just, my perspective is if I see the themes brought to life, I'm going to be pretty forgiving about some changes that you make to try to help audiences understand that.
Yeah, and I would just like challenge people that are kind of still hesitant. I'm like, are you okay with some changes that the movies made? Like, there are things that I'm not really still okay with. I really hate how they do Faramir in the movies. I think it's we can generally as fans agree that we don't like that. Does it ruin the whole thing? Does it make it so you
No.
don't want to watch the movies? Are your
I hate
objections to Rings of Power similar? I'm like, because I a lot I just continue to think that I don't think the things that they're doing are any worse than, some of the sins that the movies committed, which I'm still not super happy about, but I still love them. I think they're good representations, like you said, of the themes and the characters in general. Also, I mean, yeah, if I'm gonna shout out things I don't love about the movies, I love Frodo. He's my favorite character. I don't think he's as well done in the movies as he could be. I think that they made him different. He's definitely more of a kid. Like he's definitely an adult in the books. And I'm like, but it works for what they were doing. So
yeah.
I found other adaptations of him that are good. So
And I hate when Frodo sends Sam away and
Yeah, it's
beating
the
up
worst.
Thungle. That's probably my least favorite part, but it doesn't ruin the movie for me. And I understand. I understand the tension they're trying to build into the plot by having that be part of the plot point. When it happens, I brace myself a little bit, and then, and then I get through it, and everything's back on track. So yeah, you
I
understand.
think it's okay to have, things you don't like about adaptations. We're not saying Rings of Power is perfection and that you can't have any caveats. I don't
Yeah.
really love Gil-galad. That's what I love his actor, and he's growing on me. I just think some of their portrayal of Gil-galad has gone a little back into, oh, the elves in the movies all have to be Vulcans, and I'm like, please don't.
The only thing that I will not hear is that Charlie Vickers isn't perfection as
Oh
Sauron
my
because
God.
he's perfection as Sauron. He is perfection.
You need to watch, yeah, if you have not.
The man, when he got the role, immediately became a like master's degree level of expert in Sauron knowledge and understanding, and it shows in everything he does. So, all right, well,
Yeah.
hopefully that helps answer some of the common things that you see online about Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and some of the ways that we find ourselves not really agreeing with those criticisms. Watch the show, especially the first season. Watch it twice. Get online among fans of the show to understand some things about what the writers are trying to do. And then the second season won't take long, I think, for most Tolkien fans to really appreciate what the show is doing. So we'll talk about that more in episodes to come. Thanks, Nadia.
All right, thanks. Bye.